Welcome back, Seekers of Wisdom, to day 26 of our 30-day Wisdom Quest Challenge. We are nearing the end of our journey together, a journey that has taken us through the highest peaks of philosophical thought and the deepest valleys of self-reflection. We have gathered a treasure trove of insights about resilience, about acceptance, about our values, about our legacy. We have, in essence, spent these past weeks drawing a beautiful and intricate map to a wiser, more peaceful, and more purposeful life. We have studied its topography, memorized its landmarks, and learned the language of its legends. But today, we confront the most crucial, the most humbling, and often the most difficult step of all. We must ask ourselves, what good is a map, no matter how perfect, if we never leave our room? What good is knowing the path if we never take the first, difficult, uncertain step onto the trail itself? Today's session is about the most important part of any wisdom quest, the journey home. It is about bringing the wisdom down from the mountaintop of theory and into the chaotic, messy, beautiful marketplace of our daily lives. We will be exploring the crucial and challenging art of integrating wisdom, bridging theory and practice. We will confront the great, frustrating, and all too human chasm that so often exists between our intellectual understanding and our real-world actions, the gap between knowing and doing. We will tell a story about a man who achieved perfect peace in a silent, isolated tower, only to discover that the final, true examination of his wisdom would take place in the noisy, chaotic, and triggering city below. This is a story about the unglamorous but essential work of practice, application, and the slow, patient, and beautiful process of embodiment. Our story begins where another left off. We return to Kai, the gifted luthier from the City of Echoes. Months, perhaps even a full year, have passed since he first climbed the alabaster tower and learned the secrets of non-reaction from the silent master. But Kai did not return to the city. He had found such profound peace, such an intoxicating calm in the quiet stillness of the tower that he had begged the master to let him stay. The master, seeing the sincerity in his request, had agreed. And so, Kai's life became one of serene, scholarly contemplation. He had, he believed, achieved the goal. He had escaped the chaos of the world. His days took on a monastic rhythm. He would wake with the sun, his mind clear and undisturbed. He would spend his mornings in the tower's vast library, a place of absolute silence, devouring the ancient texts on wisdom. He read about the Stoics, the Buddhists, the Taoists. He could debate the finer points of epistemology. He could write elegant commentaries on ethics. He could explain the neurochemical basis of fear and desire. He understood, with perfect intellectual clarity, the nature of suffering, the importance of compassion, and the path to enlightenment. He spent his afternoons in deep meditation, his mind as calm and still as a windless mountain lake. His reactive echo, the spectral twin that had once tormented him, had, with no one to trigger it, become a faint and distant shadow, a whisper in the profound quiet. Kai felt wise. He felt serene. He felt, in a word, finished. He had mastered the theory, and in the sterile, safe environment of the tower, he mistook this intellectual mastery for the real thing. One morning, the silent master approached him as he was meditating by an open window, looking down at the distant, hazy city below. "Your time in the tower is over, Kai," the master said, his voice gentle but carrying a note of finality. Kai was startled, his peaceful state instantly fractured. "But master, I have found peace here. The city below is chaos. It is a world of noise and reaction. Here I am wise. There I was a fool. Why would I return to a place of suffering when I have found the cure?" "You have not found the cure," the master corrected, his eyes looking not at Kai, but at the city below. "You have read the prescription. You have found the idea of peace. You have learned the theory of wisdom in a world with no one to practice it on. This is like learning to swim on dry land. You have memorized every stroke. You understand the physics of buoyancy. You can lecture for hours on the proper way to breathe in water, but you have never actually felt the cold shock of the river. The final and most important lesson, the one that turns knowledge into true wisdom, is the integration of what you have learned into the messy, unpredictable, and difficult reality of your life. The test is not here, in the silence of theory. The test is down there, in the noise of practice. The master placed a hand on Kai's shoulder. A map is a beautiful thing, my student, but its only true purpose is to help one navigate the territory. You have fallen in love with the map. It is time to begin the journey. The application of wisdom is a far more difficult and far more noble art than its acquisition. You must return to the city of echoes. You must learn the art of embodiment. And so, with a heavy heart filled with a strange mixture of dread and a sense of undeniable truth, Kai's next chapter began. The descent down the long spiral staircase was a journey back in time, a reversal of his initial pilgrimage. With each step downward, the profound insulating silence of the tower began to fade, replaced by the faint, then growing, then overwhelming roar of the city below. When he finally opened the seamless door at the base of the tower and stepped out, the sensory assault was so intense that he physically staggered. The noise of 1,000 simultaneous conversations, the smells of street food and refuse, the frantic, anxious energy of the crowd, it was a physical blow. He had forgotten the sheer, relentless chaos of it all. He felt his carefully cultivated inner peace. The peace that had felt so solid and permanent just moments before began to crack and fracture like thin ice. This was the shock of reality, the first brutal taste of the gap between knowing and doing. His first test came within moments. As he tried to navigate the crowded street, his movements slow and deliberate compared to the city's frantic pace. A hurried merchant carrying a heavy, leaking crate of fish swerved to avoid a child and bumped into him hard. The crate tilted, and a cascade of muddy, foul-smelling water splashed all over Kai's clean, simple robes. It was a simple, meaningless accident, but the stimulus was immediate, sharp, and visceral, and Kai's reaction was just as fast. Before he could think, before a single philosophical principle could come to his aid, his echo, the volatile, reactive self he thought he had tamed, flared into existence with a shocking and violent vengeance. It was a shimmering figure of pure, indignant rage, larger and more menacing than he had seen it in over a year. "Watch where you are going, you clumsy oaf." The echo roared, its spectral voice startling the merchant and the people nearby. Kai stood frozen, horrified, a passenger in his own body. He had reacted instantly, unconsciously, a perfect echo of his old self. The stop practice, the sacred pause he had mastered and even felt smug about in the quiet of the tower, had vanished completely in the heat of this trivial real-world moment. The merchant, a rough man whose own echo was always close to the surface, reacted to the aggression. His own shadow flared. "Watch yourself, you privileged tower dweller," he shouted back. The argument escalated, a pointless, ugly display of two reactive selves clashing in the street. By the time Kai managed to regain his composure, to grab the reins of his own mind and pull himself away, his heart was pounding, his face was flushed with adrenaline and shame, and his soul was filled with a deep and profound sense of failure. He had failed. He had failed his first, simplest test. All his knowledge, all his meditation, all his hard-won wisdom, it had crumbled to dust at the first contact with reality. He stumbled through the city, making his way back to his old, dusty workshop, which he had left abandoned a year ago. He barred the door, sank to the floor, and was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of self-recrimination. It had the silent master's seal on it. His hands trembling, he broke the wax seal and unrolled the parchment. The scroll contained the master's final lesson, the one he could only receive and could only understand after he had experienced the humbling pain of his first real failure. It was a lesson on the difficult, lifelong art of integration. He saw now the profound difference between the theory of swimming and the reality of the flood. In the tower, he was a sage. Here, he was the same impulsive, reactive fool he had always been. The voice of his echo, no longer an external roar, but a vicious internal whisper, filled his mind. "You are a fraud," it hissed. "A sage on a mountain, but a fool in the street. You haven't changed at all. All that work was for nothing. You should have stayed in the tower, where you could at least pretend to be wise." He felt a wave of despair so powerful it threatened to drown him. He believed, in that moment, that all his training had been a useless illusion. The gap between what he knew in his head and what he did with his body felt like an unbridgeable chasm. He was tempted to abandon the entire painful practice, to flee back to the safety and silence of the tower, to a place where his wisdom could remain theoretical and therefore perfect and unchallenged. As he sat there in his despair, head in his hands, he noticed a small, sealed scroll lying on his old workbench, a scroll he had not seen before, left on a clean patch of wood amidst the dust. It had the silent master's seal on it. His hands trembling, he broke the wax seal and unrolled the parchment. The scroll contained the master's final lesson, the one he could only receive and could only understand after he had experienced the humbling pain of his first real failure. Did you think the work was finished, my student? Did you think wisdom was a destination, a place of arrival where the work would cease? Ah, my dear Kai, the graduation from the tower was not an end, but the true beginning. This right now, this feeling of failure and shame, this is where the journey of continuous learning truly starts. What you are feeling now, this chasm between your ideal self and your actual self, is the most fertile ground for growth there is. Do not despair. The work is not to be a perfect, flawless sage. That is an illusion of the ego. The work is to become a patient, compassionate gardener of your own actions, especially in the moments after you had stumbled. Here, then, are the true strategies for consistent application of learned wisdom. The first strategy on the scroll was called the Ritual of the Dawn. The master's note instructed Kai that wisdom is not a static state you achieve, but a living garden you must tend to daily. He must begin each day not by reacting to the world, but by intentionally calibrating his own mind before the world had a chance to throw it off balance. He was to establish a daily ritual for reflection and practice. The scroll laid it out with simple clarity. First, upon waking, before any other action, you will sit in silence for 5 minutes, just as we practiced. You must reacquaint yourself with the feeling of inner space before the world rushes in to fill it. Second, you will set a single, simple intention for your day. Not a grand goal to achieve, but a quality of being to practice. Perhaps it is, today, I will practice patience. Or today, I will listen more than I speak. Third, you will review a single principle of wisdom. Read one line from the texts, not to merely know it, but to carry it with you as your focus for the day. These simple daily habits are the trellis upon which a life of wisdom grows. Without them, the vine of your practice will wither on the ground. The second strategy on the scroll was called the compassionate correction. You will fail, the master had written, the words seeming to lift a great weight from Kai's heart. You will fail today, and you will fail tomorrow. You will react. Your echo will shout. This is not a sign of your inadequacy. It is a sign that you are human and that the work is difficult. The path of embodiment is not a straight, clean line of perfect success, but a messy, beautiful spiral of practice, failure, and correction. The goal is not to never get triggered. The goal is to get better and faster at returning to your center after you have been triggered. Every time you react, and then you notice that you have reacted, that moment of noticing is a golden victory of awareness. In that moment, do not scold yourself. Do not add the second arrow of shame to the first arrow of the mistake. Instead, you must offer yourself a radical compassion. Place a hand on your heart and say to yourself, "Ah, there is the old habit. I see it. It is okay. Now, let me take a single breath and begin again." This is the essence of continuous learning. Every misstep is not a failure to be condemned, but a lesson to be studied, an opportunity for deeper self-reflection. The third and final strategy was called the focus of the single point. The scroll warned against the ambitious and perfectionistic ego, which would want to apply all the lessons at once and then despair when it could not. Do not try to be a perfect sage today. It read, that is a recipe for overwhelming failure. You must be strategic. Choose one small thing to practice. This week, your only job is this. When you feel a trigger, do not even try to respond wisely. Simply practice the S from our lessons. Just stop. Do nothing for 1 second. That is all. If you can master the pause, you have achieved a great victory. Next week, you can practice the breath. And the week after, the observation. The application of wisdom is not a flood that washes everything away at once, but a slow, patient drop of water that can, over time, wear away the hardest stone of our old habits. Reading the scroll, Kai felt his despair begin to lift, replaced by a new, more sober, and more realistic kind of resolve. He had been looking for a magical transformation, a graduation certificate that would make him immune to his old self. It is the story of his practice. We see him in the gray dawn light of his small, dusty workshop, sitting on a simple cushion, practicing his 5 minutes of silence, establishing his daily ritual. It is not always peaceful. Some days his mind is a raging storm, but he stays. He is cultivating the ground. He now understood that the true work was a slow, humble, and daily craft, much like the making of his lutes. It was about patience, about small, consistent actions, and about treating his own mind with the same gentle, persistent care he gave to a precious piece of wood. The next part of our story is not a single dramatic event, but a long, quiet, and deeply human montage of Kai's life over the next few years. It is the story of his practice. We see him in the gray dawn light of his small, dusty workshop, sitting on a simple cushion, practicing his 5 minutes of silence, establishing his daily ritual. It is not always peaceful. Some days his mind is a raging storm, but he stays. He is cultivating the ground. We see him fail again and again. A customer is rude and his echo flares. We see the anger in his face, the sharp retort on his lips. But then we see him, a moment later, catch himself. We see him close his eyes, take a single, conscious breath, and a look of compassionate correction softens his features. He has not won the interaction, but he has won the meta-battle. He has noticed his failure without drowning in shame, and he has returned to his intention. We see him practicing the single point of focus. For weeks, his only goal is to notice the urge to interrupt when others are speaking, and to simply remain silent. It is an immense struggle. We see him in conversation with a friend, biting his tongue, his body tense with the effort of not speaking. But then we see a later scene where a friend is telling a long, rambling, emotional story, and Kai simply listens, fully present, his attention a gift. The friend, at the end, thanks him with tears in his eyes. "No one has ever listened to me like that before," he says. A true connection has been made, a connection only made possible by his new discipline. These small victories begin to accumulate, strengthening the muscle of his application. The true test comes a year later. The wealthy patron, the very man whose criticism had been the catalyst for his original crisis, returns to his workshop. He is abrasive, arrogant, and immediately begins to find fault with a new lute Kai has just finished. "The finish is uneven here," the patron says, running a dismissive gloved finger over the wood. And the tone, it still lacks the soul of a true master's work. This is the ultimate trigger. We see Kai's world slow down. We see his echo, a violent storm of red energy, surge into existence beside him, ready to scream, to defend, to attack. The old pathways in his brain light up with fire. But this time, something else is present, something he has been building day by day. A quiet, centered space of awareness. We see Kai, in his mind's eye, execute his practice, now a well-worn habit. Stop. He freezes his body, his mouth half open to retort, "Take a breath." He takes one long, slow, invisible breath, anchoring himself in the present moment. Observe. He looks at his raging echo with a strange sense of detachment and even a hint of compassion. He feels the fire in his own chest, the clenching in his jaw. He names it all: anger, pride, fear of failure. He allows it all to be there, a raging storm within his inner world, but he knows that he is the sky, not the storm. And then, from the profound silence of that sacred pause he has so diligently cultivated, he chooses. Proceed. He looks at the patron, not with anger, but with a calm, genuine curiosity. He is so taken aback by Kai's humility and genuine interest that he spends the next hour talking passionately about music, his own defenses melting away. He leaves not only having bought the lute, but having found a strange and unexpected moment of human connection. Kai watches him go and then looks at his echo. It is calm, transparent, and peaceful beside him. He has not vanquished it. He has integrated it. "You may be right," Kai says, his voice soft and even, free of any defensiveness. "My work is always a journey of continuous learning. Please show me exactly where you see the unevenness. Your eye is clearly more discerning than mine in this matter. And tell me, what does a soulful sound feel like to you? I value the opinion of a true connoisseur." The patron is utterly disarmed. His aggression, with nothing to push against, simply dissolves. He is so taken aback by Kai's humility and genuine interest that he spends the next hour talking passionately about music, his own defenses melting away. He leaves not only having bought the lute, but having found a strange and unexpected moment of human connection. Kai watches him go and then looks at his echo. It is calm, transparent, and peaceful beside him. He has not vanquished it. He has integrated it. The resolution of our story finds Kai years later. He is now a master artisan, renowned throughout the land. But he is not known for being a silent master who lives in a remote tower. He is known for being a deeply human master, a man who lives in the heart of the city, a man of great skill who also possesses an even greater peace. His workshop has become a quiet sanctuary in the midst of the city's noise, a place where people come not just for instruments, but for the sense of calm that pervades the space. He is no longer a man with a map of wisdom. He is the territory itself. He is a living example of embodiment. The final scene shows a young, frustrated artisan bursting into his workshop, her face a mask of anger and frustration. "I can't stand it," she cries, throwing a piece of splintered wood onto the floor. "My echo is ruining my life. I know all the theories. I have read all the books, but in the moment, I always fail. How do I make it stop?" Kai looks at her, and in her eyes, he sees himself all those years ago. He does not give her a lecture. He does not hand her a scroll of wisdom. He simply puts down his carving tool, turns his full, compassionate attention to her, and says, "I understand. It is the hardest work there is. Let us not talk about theories. Let us simply begin. Sit with me, and let us take one single, conscious breath together." He had become a guide, showing others the first step on the path. He had learned that the journey of wisdom is not about arriving at a destination called enlightenment or mastery. It is the journey of continuous learning itself, the daily, humble, and heroic practice of bridging the sacred gap between the person we want to be and the person we are in this one precious and imperfect moment. The goal is not to be a flawless sage on a mountaintop. The goal is to be a wiser, kinder human in the marketplace. And so the years unfurled like the strings of a lute tight with tension, resonant with learning, vibrating with unexpected harmonies. Kai lived each day as if it were a quiet composition, one where the notes of theory and the rhythm of practice had finally begun to dance in imperfect but beautiful sync. The city that once overwhelmed him had become his teacher. Its noise had become his soundtrack, its chaos his crucible. Its people imperfect, reactive, loving, impatient, hungry for change, had become the mirror in which he saw himself again and again, each time a little more clearly. He came to understand that wisdom was not a static flame housed in the stillness of towers, but a traveling lantern that flickered and danced with every gust of wind, every setback, every unpredictable moment in the street. He passed familiar faces vendors who had once barked at him, now waving gently. Children who once ran wild, now apprenticed in trades. An old rival whose bitterness had softened into quiet nods of respect. The true sage, he realized, was not the one who glowed in solitude, but the one whose flame remained lit amidst the tempests of life, and who passed that flame to others without claiming ownership of the fire. One cold autumn morning, Kai found himself walking toward the city's edge, not by plan, but by instinct. The early fog wrapped around the buildings like memory. He passed familiar faces vendors who had once barked at him, now waving gently. Children who once ran wild, now apprenticed in trades. An old rival whose bitterness had softened into quiet nods of respect. At the very outskirts of the city stood the first gate he had once passed through as a young man, confused, ego-driven, burning with ambition. It was worn now, like everything touched by time, but it stood firm. Kai reached out and touched its weathered wood. "How far you've come," he whispered, not to the gate, but to himself. Then he paused and added, "And how far there is still to go. There is only the path, and the grace with which we choose to walk it." For that was the deepest truth he now carried. There is no final mastery, no ultimate summit, no clean, triumphant end to the human journey. When he returned to the city that evening, he called together his apprentices, not just the woodworkers and musicians, but the thinkers, the parents, the street sweepers, who had found in his shop not just tools but silence, not just notes but meaning. They gathered in the courtyard, lanterns flickering, mugs of warm tea in their hands. He stood before them not with the robes of a master, but in his simple, dust-marked tunic. "There is no graduation," he said. "There is only the next practice, the next choice, the next breath. That is the work. That is the gift." He then gave each of them a blank scroll tied with a thin string. "These scrolls are not for recording theory," he explained. "They are for tracking your stumbles. Each time you fail to live as you wish to live, mark it, but not with shame. Mark it with curiosity. Then, at the end of the year, read them aloud to yourself and see how your failures have become your greatest teachers. See how each mark is a note in the song of your becoming." The years turned again. The shop became a community, a refuge, a place whispered about across distant lands, not because of its fame, but because of the peace people found within its humble walls. Travelers arrived from the farthest reaches, seeking not loots, but listening, not sound, but stillness, not advice, but presence. The workshop buzzed not just with learning, but with leadership. And Kai continued to fail, to pause, to breathe, to return, over and over. But time, that patient companion, was beginning to draw its quiet curtain. Kai's once strong hands trembled more often now. His apprentices had grown into teachers themselves. The workshop buzzed not just with learning, but with leadership. And then, one spring morning, the door opened and a woman entered, a face Kai had never seen, but whose story he instantly recognized. Her eyes were sharp with longing and heavy with fatigue. A scroll peeked out from her bag. Her hands bore the calluses of practice. "I've followed your path," she said. "I've read all your writings. I've meditated. I've failed. I've begun again. And I still don't feel wise. I still fall into anger. I still speak when I should listen. I still flinch in fear and stumble into pride. Tell me, after all these years, do you still fall short too?" Kai smiled, his eyes welling not from sadness, but from the beauty of the question. "Every single day," he said. The woman sat down slowly. The room was silent. "Then how do you bear it?" she asked. "How do you not give up?" Kai leaned in, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Because each failure is a reminder that I am still alive. Each misstep tells me I still care. And every return, every breath, every pause, every time I find my way back to center is proof that wisdom is not a destination, but a devotion." Then he stood, walked to the corner, and pulled from a wooden shelf the very first instrument he had ever made, a lute with cracks, uneven varnish, and imperfect tuning. He handed it to her. "This was never sold," he said. "Not because it isn't good enough, but because it reminds me what learning looks like. Keep it. Let it remind you that wisdom is not flawless. It is faithful. It is not about never falling. It is about learning how to fall with grace and to rise with even greater compassion." And so, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops of the City of Echoes, Kai returned to his bench, carved another piece of wood, and began again.